Hello everyone, welcome again. In this tutorial, we are going to learn how you can write and read the data from the XLS file. So we have already seen a lot about the other type of files, but let us also understand how you can read and write data from the XLS file. So this tutorial will cover how you can write the data into the XLS file and what are the libraries available out there and which you can utilize to write the data. And then in the next tutorial, we'll understand how you can read the data from the XLS file. Now, this is the most important concept and will be very widely used in the automation, because most of the time you will be keeping your data that you want to read in for the application into the Excel file, and that's where this will be really helpful to understand how you can read the data or write the data back into the Excel file. So what I have done is I have already created a new project, so I can show you what all libraries are required to import and then use them for reading and writing the data. So I have created a new project and then I have created two packages. So one is com.rcv.data and then read write XLS. So in the data, I'll keep all my data files. And so Excel, if new Excel is getting created or I'm writing into the Excel, it will create it into the data. You can also specify any specific location where you want to keep that particular file in your Windows system. But here I am just, trying to keep it within the structure of my project, which in turn, if I go and check the build path, if I just check the properties, you will see that it gets stored in my project location, right? So you can specify the location separately as well. Then in the read write XLS, I'll be specifying or I'll be keeping all my code. So the first thing to understand here is to install or download Apache POI. So Apache POI is the library which is used to read and write the Excel file. So it's if you just search for Apache POI download and open this poi.apache.org, you will see that this is the Java API for Microsoft Documents, right? So if you go into the details, so there are a lot of new additions that keep on coming, and this is the very widely used API. So we'll be using Apache POI to read and write data into Excel file. Now, if we want to use it, we have to download the library first. Okay, so to download, just go to the download page and download this binary distribution, which is the .zip file. Okay, and just I'll download this and use any mirror. So the file has been downloaded. Now let me open, or let me show the folder, and let me copy this. So I'll copy it and I'll place it in the C drive. So I have already created a folder, external jars, and I'll place all the external jars in this particular folder. All right. Now just unzip these. So I'll just say extract here, and it will create a folder POI 4.1.2. This is the latest version that I have got. This version might change in future because of the new releases. So whatever is the latest version, just pick that. So extraction has happened. Now if you open this folder here, there are some jars here that we need to import. If you go to this folder, there are two jars here, and then in the lib there are a couple of more jars. Okay, so if I want to explain you what all jars are necessary, these are the jars that I have tested, which will work if you import just these jars. That will help you in writing the data into the file. But in case you don't want to figure around, say for example in the next release things change, so the best way is to whatever jars are available here, or these two jars and the jars that are available in the lib file, just import all of those in your project. So let's prepare our project first. So in the project, in order to use Apache POI library, we first have to configure the build path or import these jars, right? So what we'll do is we'll go to libraries, class path, add external jars, and in the external jars, we'll just go to that particular folder, select the jars that are there. Then again, I'll keep it simple. I'll import all the jars that are available in the lib folder, and then I'll go to the other folder, which is an import XML beans and the other jars, right? So what this will ensure is that even if there is any dependency in the next release from other jars, so this is the whole package of Apache POI. So you don't have to worry about if that there is some other class that is missing if you import everything in this particular reference library. And this is really important when you are learning something, because otherwise when you get stuck and you are not able to figure out which jar is missing by reading out the error message, then that's a bit of a stopper in the learning. So it's better to add all these jars at once. So now our project setup is done. Now let us create a new class, and I'll name the class as write. So I'll say write data to XLS. All right, and let me include the main method. Okay, so now when we import all these jars, what it means is that whatever Apache POI library classes provides, then we can use those classes, right? So we have the reference of those classes, and now we can use those classes. So if I go to the documentation of Apache POI, let me just Google Apache POI Java docs, and this is the starting point to learn any of the library or the Java. So if we go to the Java docs and access it online, it will give me all the details or what all classes and packages are there, and we'll understand some of the packages that we'll be using in this particular tutorial to write the data into the file. So the first and foremost class that we'll be using is the XLSX workbook, right? So whenever you are creating any Excel file, you first create the workbook and then sheet manually whenever you are doing it. So by default, when you launch the Excel sheet, it already creates the workbook and sheet at once, because it's a Windows application. But in case of Java program, when you are trying to create with the Java program, you have to first call the class which is XLSX workbook. And if we go to the documentation, let's see if we can find that XLSX workbook, right? So if we just check this particular class, that's not the one. Yes, this is the XLSX workbook. So that class, what exactly it does is, it is the high level representation of spreadsheet ML workbook. This is the first object that most of the users will use whether they are reading or writing a workbook. So this is the first class that for which you will create an object whether you are reading or writing an Excel file. Okay, so when we say XLSX workbook, it creates a new spreadsheet ML workbook. So what we'll do is we'll simply go to Eclipse and we'll say XLSX workbook, and we'll say workbook is equal to new, and I'll copy XLSX workbook and create an object of it, right? That's the first step. Now as soon as you will do it, just highlight over, and because we have already imported Apache POI libraries, we'll get this import XLSX workbook option and Apache POI XLSX user model. Just import that and the error will be gone. Now the next step is to, once you have the workbook, you create a sheet within it, right? So in Excel, you have the workbook, you create a workbook, and then you create a sheet in order to actually start writing something in the sheet. So there is another class which is XLSX sheet, and if I just search it, XLSX sheet, what it does is it creates a sheet, right? So sheets are the central structures within workbook. So whenever you launch a workbook, you can create sheets within the workbook. So that's what this class will do. So we'll say XLSX sheet, and then we'll say for example sheet 1. That will be the sheet that will get created, and then this class takes the reference of the workbook. So basically within the workbook we will be creating, right? So you can't create sheet standalone, you have to create the workbook first. So when you will say sheet 1 and then say workbook dot, then you will get all the methods that are available, and you can say create sheet. All right, so create sheet, you can specify the name of the sheet. So I'll say I want to create a sheet with the name of sheet 1. All right, and that creates a sheet. So now once you have the workbook and sheet ready, the next step is to add the rows and column. To add the row, we'll simply say row, and I'll say row 0 R0, and then this will, where you will create the row, you will create a row in the sheet. So you'll say sheet 1 dot, and it will list the methods that are available, and you can simply say create row. So I'll simply search create and we'll say create row, and you have to specify the row number as an integer. So if you say 0, it will pick the first row, or it will start the first row. The index is 0 if the index is 0. So I'll say 0, and then I'll create the column or cell, right? So to create the cell, what we'll do is we'll say cell. Let me import the library here. So you just need to import row from Apache POI, right? So please make sure you import this Apache POI one, and then cell will create cell, and cell, let's say 0, C0, and cell will take, where you will create the cell, we'll create it into the row that we have created. So we'll say row 0 dot create cell, and we have to provide where we want to create the cell. So 0th index, I'll again, so this will be the row and cell that will get created. Import this cell from Apache POI library. So now we have created the row and cell, right? The next step is, once you have created the workbook, sheet, row and cell, you will set the value. You want to write something in that particular cell. So to write something in the cell, what you have to do is you simply have to say in that particular cell, just call the method set cell value. There are lots and lots of methods. You can go through and understand what all these methods do. So if I say set cell value, it accepts, different arguments. So Boolean, calendar, date. I just want to set a string. So you can try with different combinations, and I'll provide the string as RCV Academy, say for example. So this is all about how we need to create the workbook, sheet, row, cell, and set the cell value. So that completes the step 1 of this, setup. The next step is to actually create a file and then use file output stream to send whatever we have whatever data we have set into that particular sheet and write it. So we have already learned in the previous tutorial about the file output stream. If we want to write something into the file, we'll use file output stream. So we'll create an object of the file class first. So we'll create the file, and we can say new file, and this accepts the string argument, and you have to specify the location where you want to create the file. So if I want to create it into the com RCV data, so I'll simply just right click and go to the properties, and let me copy this location and then paste the location here, and you will see that 2 backslashes are already automatically added in this case. If not, just make sure that you add 2 backslashes in Windows, and then at the last I'll specify the name of the file. So I'll say test data.xls. Okay, so now the next step is we'll just import this class from Java file, Java IO. Okay, So next step are all same as we used in the other example. So we'll create a new object of file output stream as well. So I'll say file output stream, and we'll create an object of file output stream, and file output stream class. When we create an object, it takes the reference of the file that you want to create. So we'll simply pass the reference of the file and import file output stream from java.io. The next step is to write. Let me save it. Okay, so we have to include the throws declaration here. So file not found exception, we have just added that. And the next step is to actually write into the workbook. So we can simply say workbook and then dot write. So we'll simply call the method. We'll write this output stream into the workbook, right? So we'll simply pass the reference of this output stream into the workbook, and I'll again surround it with the throws declaration. And the next step is now to close the file. So once you have written into the workbook, we'll simply say workbook dot close. Okay, and this will close the workbook, and we'll also close the output stream. So we'll say fos dot close and then workbook dot close. And once everything has been done successfully, at last let me just print a statement there so that we can know that file is written successfully. So if there won't be any error, I just want to print that file is written successfully on my console, right? So if you just see the steps, just very few steps. So you just have to create the workbook, sheet, row, cell in which you want to store any data, provide that data, use the class file and file output stream to chain all these requests, right? So if I run this, and as a Java application, you will see file is written successfully. And if I refresh this particular project, you will see a file has been created, right? If I just right click and open with, let me open with because it's an XLS format, I need to choose this Microsoft Excel, the old one, and I'll say yes. And you can see that, let me close it. You can see that data has been written into this particular file, right? Now say for example, I want to change the row and cell. So if I want to write one more data into this particular file, what I'll do is I'll create one more cell. Say for example, I want to create a new row, so I'll say row 1, and then in the row 1 I want to store the data into cell 1, right? So we simply need to change it to row 1, and here I'll say row 1 and cell 1, and we'll store the new data into cell 1. So I'll simply save it now. I've changed the data. Here I have removed the data. Let me add that. So I'll say c0 dot set cell value, and I'll put a string there. All right, and within the quotes, let me run it again, and okay, there is some error. So the file is open actually, so let me close it, and I'll say don't save, and then again run it. So you'll see file is written successfully. If I open it again, let me open in an external application. So you can see that it has printed RCV Academy, and then in the first row, this is because when we specify first index, this is the first row, this is the 0th index, this is the first index. So this is basically the first row and then the first column, and we have populated a new value there, right? So this is all about how you will be writing the data into the Excel sheet using the Apache POI library. This is really important. And if, say for example, here I have specified the old specification of the file. Now the new one is, if I say XLSX and change it to 1 and run this, and you can see that new file has been created. If I open this, that opens up successfully, right? So that's all about how you will be writing the data into the Excel file using Apache POI library. Hope you like the tutorial. In the next tutorial, we will learn about how to read the data from the Excel file using Apache POI library. Thank you very much for watching.